I couldn't tell you how many times some of the best horror games out there had me in tears. Whether it was the death of a fan favorite character or the reveal of a tragic backstory that explains everything that the protagonist is going through. Some of the best stories in horror games are the ones that leave us completely broken by the time the credits roll. So on the 13th day of the 31 days of Halloween, I'll be taking a look at some of the most emotional horror games out there as I give you guys the 10 games that had the biggest impact on me. As always, to keep things interesting, I'll only be featuring one entry per franchise. Also, spoiler warning for today's video, as I'll be covering the most emotional moments of the games that appear on today's list, so yeah, spoilers obviously. Don't worry, you can use the chapters to skip around and pass by any horror game that you don't want to be spoiled on. Before we get started though, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel for more survival horror content. Also hit that like button if you enjoyed today's topic. Finally, this video is officially sponsored by G Fuel, and if you use the link below or the code NerdSpaceGames at checkout, you can pick up 2 tubs for the price of 1. That's right, buy one get one is back, and there's plenty of spooky tubs available just in time for Halloween, and the sale goes on until October 15th. Plus, it supports the channel in a big way. Again, use code NerdSpaceGames at checkout. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games, and this is the top 10 most emotional horror games of all time. Let's get it. Number 10, Detention. Set in Taiwan during the White Terror, Detention follows the young student Rei as she wakes up in her school that has now become some sort of nightmarish-like purgatory. Every inch of the school is filled with dark entities based on dark folktales. As the game goes on though, we eventually learn why Rei is here. As a student that never quite fit in, Rei grew close to and developed a relationship with the school's guidance counselor. Then, as their relationship was recognized by her teacher in the school, he decided to break it off. Rei misunderstood the whole reason why he broke it off, thinking that he wanted to pursue a relationship with the teacher, and it led to her reporting him, her teacher, and some of the classmates, which led to most of them being arrested and her guidance counselor being executed. Failing to face the consequences of her own actions, Rei grew depressed and took her own life, which eventually brought her to this purgatory. This world became a loop for Rei in which she would continue to face the tragic things in her life, including the failed relationship of her parents, over and over again until she could accept it and what she did and eventually, hopefully, move on. Number 9, Resident Evil Village. The Resident Evil series isn't really known for being emotional games, but every now and then we'll see the franchise deliver a heart-wrenching goodbye or a tear-jerker reunion. Of all the games in the franchise though, none of them come even close to hitting the same emotional impact that Village has throughout its story. Unlike the rest of the series, Village features multiple moments that'll leave you completely devastated. From the death of a side character that we all grew attached to in the form of Elena, to the realization that Ethan is not alive and that he must sacrifice himself so that his daughter, his wife, and Chris can all escape. Yeah, there was just a lot of heartbreaking moments in this game. Hell, even the touching short-lived reunion between Rose and Ethan in the Shadows of Rose DLC had me breaking down throughout the entire final scene between them. Even if we look at most of the villains of the game, which each somewhat have a sad and tragic background, from Mother Miranda trying to resurrect her deceased daughter to the rest of the 4 village leaders each having a small, sometimes very small redeeming trait about their backstory. Yeah, other Resident Evil games may have a moment or two that might make us a little sad or emotional, but Village has a ton of those moments and it's easily the most emotional game of the franchise. Number 8, Amnesia Rebirth. When it comes to the Amnesia series, every single game in this franchise ends on a tragic note. Seriously, even the quote-unquote good ending is hardly a happy ending. With that being said, Rebirth might be the most tragic and emotional game of the series, due to the game following a pregnant woman who loses the father of her unborn child, to then finding out that some alternate reality goddess wants her child for herself. Yeah, this game leads us down a path of constant heartbreak with an emotional payoff. Throughout most of the game, you're trying to escape and keep your unborn child safe, while at the same time you have to fight off terrifying creatures and even make decisions that completely break you. From losing all of her friends, to then being forced to make one of the hardest decisions a parent could possibly make at the end of the game, Tassie goes through hell from start to finish, and one of the most emotional journeys I've ever experienced in a horror game. Number 7, Devotion. Feng Yu had everything: an amazing job as a screenwriter, a famous beautiful actress as his wife, and a talented and loving daughter who wanted nothing more than to spend time with her father. Unfortunately, Devotion is not a happy story, and when Feng Yu's career flips upside down, he loses it as he tries to find ways to support his family without having to rely on his wife being the breadwinner. With pride preventing him from allowing that, it cost him his marriage eventually, and then when his daughter joins a talent show to try to become famous so that she could make her father happy again, she breaks down after losing, and it leads to her becoming extremely sick. When the doctors fail to tell him what's wrong with his daughter, Feng Yu turns to a dark cult, and this leads him down a dark and horrifying path that ends up in the death of his daughter. Throughout the game, we seem to be in some sort of purgatory for Feng Yu as he revisits his apartment over and over again, but in different time periods of his life. Eventually, Feng Yu becomes somewhat devoted to this cult, which turns out to be nothing more than a bunch of frauds, and he seeks them out to learn how to save his daughter. This eventually leads to him spending a ton of money on them, and most importantly, believing them when they tell him about a horrifying solution to curing his daughter, by putting her in a bathtub full of rice wine, locked up for 7 days straight. Needless to say, this resulted in the death of his daughter, and the entire game is really about Feng Yu visiting all the tragic moments in his past and becoming aware of everything he lost along the way. Number 6, Limbo. Just the setting alone and watching the nameless boy push his way through this purgatory of some sort is enough to spark emotions throughout the entire experience. However, it's near the latter half of the game when the story finally starts to paint the final picture and reveals to us what is actually going on. The nameless boy has been trying to find his sister this whole time, in this world after death, if you will. Now, the ending scene is up for interpretation, honestly, as I've heard so many different theories as to what actually happens here, but sadly, none of them are actually good. For example, one interpretation of the scene is that the boy and his sister died and woke up in limbo, separated from each other. And every time the boy finally finds his sister, he's pulled away from her again while she runs away. The two can never be reunited. You could also view it as it being the boy that actually died but not the sister. In this regard, that means that the boy constantly tries to reach his sister, but because he is dead and in limbo, he can never reach her. There's other ways to look at this scene as well, but again, no matter how you look at it, this is an emotional scene that doesn't leave us with a happy ending, no matter how you look at it. Number 5, Silent Hill Shattered Memories. Most people don't realize this, but the truth is that technically speaking, Silent Hill 1 has gotten a remake before. Well, sort of. I should say that it's more of a reimagining that's very loose with the source material. I'm of course referring to Silent Hill Shattered Memories. This is a game that doesn't get a lot of love, and honestly, I can totally understand why. It does a lot wrong for a Silent Hill game. The gameplay is almost non-existent, the lore of the Silent Hill franchise is drastically changed here, and the game is nowhere near as scary as most Silent Hill entries. But looking past the fact that this is supposed to be a Silent Hill game, the story is quite incredible actually. Shattered Memories tells one of the most heartbreaking stories as it explores loss, depression, and other darker and more mature themes in a way that's different than most psychological horror games out there. See, the big twist of this game is that Harry Mason died in a car crash, and the fog world of Silent Hill is actually a figment of Cheryl Mason's mind, in which it's how she sees her father that she never got to grow up with since she lost him as a child. What's even more interesting in this game is the fact that the choices and decisions that you make for Harry shapes Harry into the father he was to Cheryl, and in reality what you're doing is how Cheryl views Harry because of what she remembers of him. Also, side note before I move on, the soundtrack is absolutely incredible in this game, and it definitely helps set the tone for some of the most emotional scenes of the game. I wish I could get away with playing some of the tracks, but Shattered Memories doesn't play when it comes to copyright claims. But seriously, look up the song called Acceptance from Silent Hill Shattered Memories. It's absolutely haunting. Number 4, Fatal Frame 2, Crimson Butterfly. From the moment we enter the lost village of Minokami Village, we are thrown into one of the most emotional psychological horror games ever created. The story explores not only the tragic story of Mio and Mayu, but an entire village full of tragic backstories that mostly involves the death of young children killing each other. Yeah, see, Fatal Frame 2 centers around a village that performs a ritual to keep the dark forces at bay. This ritual is known as the Crimson Sacrifice Ritual, in which a set of twins chosen by the village must perform a ritual in which the younger twin strangles and murders the older twin. Yeah, really horrible stuff. The name Crimson Butterfly comes from the mark left on the sacrificed twin's neck after the ritual is complete. Yeah, hearing a backstory like that and then realizing that the entire game centers around ghosts of this village trying to kill you, obviously we're in for one long and emotional ride. Throughout the game, we see different sets of twins that went through the rituals, both failed and successful situations. For example, you have the Kiryu twins, who in my opinion are the scariest ghosts in this game. The story here is that one twin successfully killed her sister as per the ritual, but was unable to move on past what she did. Her father tried to help her grieve and came up with the brilliant idea of making a puppet version of her deceased sister. Clearly, this was a bad idea, as this puppet became possessed by a dark entity and manipulated the living sister into killing her own father. Yeah, bad idea there, Pops. The most tragic moment though has got to be the ending of the game, in which Mayu realizes what her purpose is. As it turns out, the twins were lured to the village to perform the ritual themselves so that they could push back the dark forces once again. So, in some sort of strange ritual that ends up possessing both sisters, Mio kills Mayu, and the final cutscene we see is Mio running after a crimson butterfly, signifying that her sister is now deceased, crying and calling out to Mayu as she does. Again, going back to the soundtrack, just like with Shattered Memories, this track right here hits hard. It tugs at your heartstrings for sure. Number 3, Rural Rose. Any game that has a tragic story involving dogs is immediately going to crack my top 3 most emotional games concerning my love for dogs in general. And guess what? Rural Rose fits that description, unfortunately. At the start of the game, we are introduced to Brown the dog, a beautiful pup that we immediately become attached to right away, who wants nothing more than to help and protect Jennifer, the main protagonist of the game. Throughout the story, Brown and Jennifer's relationship gets stronger and stronger, but unfortunately, the game also begins to tease the fate of Brown pretty early on. From finding Brown in a brown bag to then seeing brown bags with other dead animals in it throughout the games, yeah, it didn't look like Brown was going to get a happy ending. This theory is proven when we finally hit the climax of the game and everything is revealed to us. As it turns out, the entire game is kind of a way for Jennifer to face her tragic past and her survivor's guilt. As a kid, Jennifer lost her parents and became friends with the orphans of Rose Garden Orphanage. In this orphanage, a group of kids established the Red Crown Aristocats Club, which was led by Jennifer's best friend at the time, Wendy. However, Jennifer found a brown pup one day and grew very attached to it, and when she did, Wendy became jealous. Out of jealousy, Wendy ordered the other kids of the club to beat Jennifer's dog to death. Yeah, gruesome. I know. Fuck those kids. Well, I kind of feel bad saying that because things didn't end well for them either. When Jennifer breaks and embarrasses Wendy in front of the other kids, she seeks revenge by manipulating a grieving father into punishing all of her friends. Unfortunately for Wendy, the father goes too far and kills all of the kids, including Wendy, and Jennifer is left as the lone survivor of the Aristocrats Club. Crazy thing is that there's a lot of other backstories in this game that symbolizes other traumatic events that befell these children, like Clara, aka the Mermaid Princess. Rural Rose is not a happy game, and from start to finish, you will be an emotional wreck, trust me. Number 2, The Last of Us. I went back and forth about which Last of Us game to feature on today's list, and honestly, it was very hard coming to a decision. But ultimately, I gave the slight edge to the first game by a very small margin, but I can totally see why others would pick the second game as being a little more emotional. Focusing on the first game, the introduction to the story with Joel and Sarah is easily one of the most heartbreaking and devastating starts to a video game. Watching Joel's daughter, Sarah, die in his arms leaves me completely broken no matter how many times I watch this scene. You would think with an opening like this that the game would eventually take its foot off the pedal for a second, but honestly, it just continues to hit you hard where it hurts the most. From experiencing what Ellie went through when she saw Riley die right in front of her in the Left Behind DLC, to Joel losing another person close to him due to this unfair world. Even in the middle of the game, we learn about 2 brothers, Sam and Henry, who we grow attached to, and we see both Joel and Ellie become close to as well. Unfortunately, as you would expect with an emotional game like this one, it ends in one of the most emotional moments in the series. It's actually kind of funny that I started this entry talking about how The Last of Us has one of the most impactful and emotional introductions in a video game, but the ending could fit that description as well, as we see Joel choose Ellie above the entire world essentially. The Last of Us is without a doubt one of the most emotional games of all time. I said it, and there's so many other moments I didn't talk about in this game that also add to the emotional impact of the story, but for the sake of keeping this video as short as possible, let's just end it here. Number 1, The Walking Dead Telltale series. I kind of feel bad about giving The Walking Dead the number 1 spot because honestly, I'm kind of including all 4 seasons as a single entry on today's list. But even if we were just looking at that first season, I would still give the title of most emotional horror game to The Walking Dead Telltale series. That's how impactful this franchise is, let alone the first season. From the moment we are introduced to Clementine and Lee, we are immediately rooting for them. Throughout the story, The Walking Dead forces the player to make tough choices, sometimes impossible choices that we don't want to make. For example, despite nobody dying in this scene, I would argue that one of the most heartbreaking moments of the entire franchise is choosing who gets to eat and who gets to starve. Yeah, I can't even talk about this scene without choking up a little bit. Still, most of the heartbreaks and emotional impact of this game comes from people dying based on the choices you make. Losing one friend to save another, or watching someone that you spent so much time with pay the ultimate price for a mistake someone else made. The Telltale series does a fantastic job at capturing the same emotional impacts of each death as the live action series does, honestly. But we can't talk about how emotional The Walking Dead is without mentioning perhaps one of the most heartbreaking and emotional moments in all video games, the death of Lee. See, in chapter 4 of season 1, Clementine gets kidnapped and Lee gets bit. In the final chapter, the player could choose to cut Lee's arm off to stop the infection or leave it, but the choice doesn't really change anything. After rescuing Clementine, Lee is dying in front of her and he must give her one final lesson. to say goodbye. Lee and Clementine has one final moment that leaves me with tears no matter how many times I watch it, and then it ends with the player making one final choice for Lee: tell Clementine to shoot him or tell her to leave him. Man, I hate talking about this scene, and just mentioning it makes me kind of tear up a little, not gonna lie. But that does it for this episode of Nerd Space Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Is The Walking Dead Telltale series the most emotional horror game out there, or is there another horror game that you think deserves that title? Also, are there any tragic horror games that I did include on my list? Let me know all of your thoughts down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.